If you've ever wondered what Fallout New Vegas would look like if it were a fantasy game, you've come to the right place. And if you've ever wondered what Skyrim would have been like if it were made by Obsidian and not Bethesda, well, join along because both those roads lead to the same place, Avowed. Let's not waste any more time and dive right into it because we have a lot to unpack. And first, I want to talk about a little something just to provide some context. I won't be making any definitive comments about the game's performance because as soon as I got into it, I realized that the upscaler settings were broken. Changing from DLSS to FSR made no difference, and neither did turning it off entirely. The only thing that seemed to be working was TSR, and that, frankly, is just horrible. Moving around creates this weird blurriness even with motion blur turned off, and it's extremely noticeable at 1080p. I ended up switching to 1440p, which made it less apparent, but I can still tell it's there. For what it's worth, running the game on the RTX 4070 Ti Super, my frame rate was around 50-55 FPS in cities and crowded areas, and 60-70 FPS in the open, less crowded areas. This was at the highest settings with RTX off. I'm sure it would have been much better had DLSS been working, but it wasn't, so I can't say anything about it. Which is a real shame, because the game itself is beautiful. With my initial disappointment hanging over me, I made slow progress. But the moment I fell in love with Avowed's visuals, PSR and all, was when the night came for the first time. The towering, fluorescent lighthouse in the distance, the gentle glow of the vegetation, the somber yet incredibly, tastefully incandescent lights, the drop-dead gorgeous skybox, and the moon in that starry sky. Oh man, when I saw the moon,
Shiz in my pants.
But it's not just the nighttime lighting that made me
Shiz in my pants.
The lighting throughout the game has such a nice, ambiance. Whether you're in a secret basement or sneaking up to someone's room or just running around in the open world during the day, every corner of this world has a sight to behold. And you're gonna want to see all of it because exploration in this game feels really, really good. The general vibe that I got was kinda like Skyrim, but a lot more colorful. Just listen to the ambient music. But where Avowed differs in its world design is that instead of one huge open world, you have multiple open areas where you can travel back and forth. Each region has a major city and a vast wilderness which has caves and tombs and towers and lakes that you can explore at length. And explore you should, because not only you'll find some great views, but they're also littered with secrets and treasures and unique weapons and loot. You can find some of the best gear in the most unexpected places, and trust me, you'll want to pick up everything you come across. If there's one tip I can give you based on my time with Avowed, it's this. I'm telling you, no matter how useless something might seem at the moment, just because it'll eventually come in handy. You see, Avowed doesn't have level scaling for damage and enemies, so while you can still gain abilities and meaningful stat upgrades by leveling up, the main thing that makes a difference when damaging enemies is your equipment level. Weapons and armor have 5 tiers, and each tier has 3 levels. And the higher the enemy's tier is compared to your equipments, the less damage it's going to take from you. Which means you're gonna need a good amount of upgrade materials to keep up your damage output. And this is where I fucked up. If you're a sensible person and stick to one build, let's say a greatsword or a bow, you only need to upgrade your weapon and armor. You can also use pistols or an arquebus, which is like a rifle. But I decided to be a wizard/fighter, which meant that in one loadout I had a wand in my main hand and a grimoire in the offhand. In the other loadout, I had a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. I mean, the game allows you to switch between weapon loadouts at the press of a button, so obviously I went for it. But that also meant that I had to now upgrade 4 different things, not including my armor, to play my build effectively. Which means I was constantly running out of upgrade materials. So, if you're anything like me, just make sure you loot everything because even if you don't use it immediately, you'll either end up breaking it down for upgrade materials or selling it for gold, which will allow you to buy more stuff later on. And if you're wondering how you'll deal with that pesky encumbrance, worry not, because this is where Avowed's quality of life features set it apart from something like Skyrim. In this game, consumables and upgrade materials do not have any weight, and neither do accessories like rings and amulets, or gloves and boots for that matter, because they count as clothing and not armor. So you can pretty much loot to your heart's content. And while we're talking about looting, make sure you stock up on lockpicks. Sadly, this game doesn't have a lockpicking minigame, It just takes a certain number of lockpicks to open up chests and lockboxes, so make sure you always have enough. As a godlike, you're blessed, not only with shit growing on your face, but also with some cool ass abilities which come in pretty handy during combat. For instance, you can heal and revive your allies, or you can shoot out shards that root your enemies in place, among other things. Combining these abilities with the freedom to use whatever weapon you want regardless of your stats means there's just so much you can do, and all of it feels really good. Whether I was chucking projectiles from range Harry Potter style, or casting fireball to burn my enemies down, or calling a blizzard to freeze them, or whether I was rushing headfirst into combat with a flaming sword in my hand, every combat encounter was as intense as it was fun. I also tried fighting strong enemies while I was underpowered, and boy did I get my ass handed to me. I did the sneaky approach too, shooting enemies with a bow or a wand from the distance, or getting in close for a critical hit for high damage. There's an incredible degree of choice and freedom where you get to decide how you want to deal with objectives and enemies. But it's not like levels don't play a role at all. Leveling up in Avowed gives you a character point and an ability point. You can use character points to gain attributes for stat bonuses. These attributes also provide additional dialogue choices. The ability points give you various active and passive abilities and different skill trees which you can pick depending on your build and playstyle. Just like the weapons, you don't get logged into a skill tree and can freely put an ability point wherever you want. In addition to your own moves, you also get to control companion abilities. You'll be joined by 4 companions over the course of the game, each of whom have their own unique abilities both in and out of combat. For instance, the first 2 companions you meet are Kai and Marius. Marius is a ranger who can root enemies in place and scans for loot in your surroundings. Kai is a fighter who uses a sword and a gun and can help you set fire to webs and vines to open up pathways. And these environmental interactions come in really handy too. Fire clears up blocked paths, water can be frozen to reach new areas, and lighting can power up mechanisms to open doors. If you equip a grimoire of elements, you'll have these spells at your own disposal. Otherwise, you can use the corresponding grenades or companion ability for the same result. Now, whatever I played of Dragon Age Veilguard, I found it fun. But I never finished the game, mainly because the writing didn't draw me. At least, not in the way that Avowed did. To be fair, Veilguard does have some good bits, like this scene.
My little brother. He thought he needed to take care of me. He called me Vora Shivan, hummingbird, in Elven. Said it was because I could never sit still. But he loved me for it. Said it kept him thinking, trying to keep up. And he helped me too. He kept me focused, anchored. And now he's gone. Because I wasn't good enough.
It's not your fault. You have to know that.
Then why does it feel like it was?
But most of it is just straight up bad, which feels terrible to say because Bioware was once setting the standards for RPG writing. But it makes me so happy to say that for every complaint that I had with Veilguard's writing, Avowed just won me over in almost every way. For instance, sometimes when you make camp and rest, you get this voice in your head. It asks you about the events that are taking place in the story and the world around you. I won't go into major details because hello,
spoilers.
But I'll give you one example from the early game. Your first boss fight is with an infected bear. After you kill it, the voice expresses sympathy with the bear and asks you why you had to do that. Now, you didn't have a choice in this matter, so this question is less about why you did that and more about justifying the action after the fact. You can say that the bear attacked you so it was self-defense, or you can say that the bear was sick and it was an act of mercy. Ultimately, it's like this moment of quiet self-reflection, and in that moment, I realized that I'm not justifying my action to this voice, but to myself. Since the game deals with metaphysical themes and the cycle of death and rebirth, these interactions really bring out that extra layer of flavor in the writing that I would love to see more of. But it's not just dreaming and talking in sleep. You do get to make a lot of decisions that actively impact the outcome of quests, both story-related and otherwise. You show up to the Living Lands as the Emperor's envoy to deal with this plague known as the Dream Scourge. But once there, you find out that the place has plenty of problems of its own, including political unrest, a slowly but surely brewing rebellion, a military group that might as well be a religious cult, assassination schemes, trapping gods and souls. It's a whole mess, and unraveling it is a lot of fun. So rest assured, There are plenty of choices to be made and consequences to be dealt with, or as the cool kids call it, plenty of chances to fuck around and find out. Quests can fail if you progress the story past certain points. Some shit will go down one way or another, but the kind of shit that goes down and how you deal with it is up to you. And your trusty companions don't only come in handy while fighting, they're also really well written and acted out. For example, my favorite party member was Marius. This is one snarky fucking smartass who has something sarcastic to say about anything and everything. Here, just take a look.
Marius, this is the infamous Adiran envoy. Envoy? Marius.
Well, any friend of Kai's is definitely a person.
You mean it? You have no thirst for vengeance, no righteous desire for justice.
Not the path I'd take. But hey, I only get to die once.
I'm not kidding. This guy is like the Chandler Bing of the Living Lands. And this also goes to the companions' interpersonal dialogue with each other. Like, take this conversation for instance.
Listen, Kai, I need you to stalk like a cat, not stomp around like a Balrog.
My training was a lot bigger on stomping than stalking, unfortunately.
Right, and I got cooking lessons in solace, but you don't see me making beetle mash every night for dinner. The bears out here can hear a snapfly dropping Sokka from across the stair. You don't want to get eaten, you need to walk softly.
I'll remind you of that next time you start playing your flute at camp.
That is different. Bear's natural prey doesn't tend to play flutes.
They might show up to get you to stop.
I've had this flute for years, and I have yet to be killed by a bear.
On second thought, maybe that's what's keeping them away.
I'm telling you, these two have the same dynamic like Kaine and Weiss from Mere Replicant. You know, minus the sexual tension obviously.
Vice, you dumbass!
But putting the silly stuff aside, the kind of writing that Avowed has is something that I would have liked to see in a game like Dragon Age Veilguard. Characters have distinct personalities, the dialogue makes you want to pay attention, and at no point does it feel that it's been dumbed down just for the sake of mass appeal. The game does have its fair share of small issues, but none in my experience were bad enough to affect my enjoyment, other than the stupid TSR issue. For all the grief that I gave Veilguard, its visuals and performance were never a problem. And it goes to show how a major publisher can use an in-house engine like Frostbite to its advantage, rather than the entire godforsaken industry moving to Unreal Engine 5 and flicking the toggles for an easy out. But, if I'm being completely honest, Avowed is so fun that even the broken settings weren't enough to get in the way. I'm completely serious. I saw the same issue with Dying Light 2 at launch, and I never finished that game. But this, I couldn't put down. Anyway, the first weird thing that I noticed in Avowed was that wildlife and some NPCs seem to be running at 30 FPS, while the rest of the game is at 60 FPS. Nothing too bad. Honestly, it's a little funny, but still, kinda jarring whenever I saw it. Another issue, which was a little more annoying, was that after casting an ability using the ability wheel, any key that I pressed immediately afterwards on the keyboard wouldn't work unless I pressed it again. Not exactly game-breaking, but it became an issue during some of the more intense fights. Now, one of the bigger problems I had with Avowed is that you can only upgrade the weapons in the camp. This was a problem because upgrading a weapon means having to sit through 2 loading screens, one for setting up the camp and the other for leaving. But on the plus side, you can fast travel to any camp from any point in the region and come back to that same point when you leave the camp, which makes traveling back and forth much easier. But there are a couple of things that I absolutely love. The first being the fact that sprinting does not consume stamina. The world of Avowed is beautiful, and I didn't want to fast travel at all, so this was a godsend. Trust me, as someone who played Skyrim for almost 50 hours before realizing it actually has fast travel, you have no clue how good and actually limitless running around feels in Avowed. The best part is that you can continue sprinting without worrying about stamina even in combat, so you can just run circles around enemies if they're giving you too much trouble. But still, if you're underpowered enough, no amount of running around will save you because these motherfuckers know how to aim. The second thing that I really loved was that the game feels just as good to play in third person as it does in first person. As a personal preference, any game that let me create a custom character and has different kinds of armor and weapons, I want to be able to see them. This is a complaint I had with Cyberpunk as well. After all, if I'm going to spend time creating a character and there is a variety of great looking clothes and armor that I can put on, it becomes a little disappointing if I never really get to see it. Avowed doesn't have that issue. In the same vein, the game also feels just as good to play with a controller as it does with a mouse and keyboard. To this day, for some reason, I can't play Skyrim with a controller. But with Avowed, even though most of my time was spent using keyboard and mouse, I never had an issue just switching to a controller and relaxing back in my chair. As I get to the end of the video, I feel I need to address a couple of big-ass elephants in the room. The first is more to the benefit of my fellow Indians, but what the fuck is wrong with Microsoft? On Steam, the price of the game is 79% higher than Steam's own recommended regional pricing. If I go to the Microsoft store, it's even higher than that. It's like Microsoft doesn't want you to buy the game. And it's not just India, the Steam pricing is above the recommended regional price in most regions. But of course, they don't even want you to buy an Xbox, just get Game Pass and you're good to go, so what the hell, right? And don't even get me started on the Premium Edition. I mean, let's just get one thing right out of the way because this is happening way too much and the moment I saw this post, it pissed me off. You are not getting 5 days early access if you pay for the Premium Edition. That is the actual release date of the game because the only barrier is the price of admission. That's it. It's just marketing designed to prey on people's FOMO. In reality, you're only being punished for not paying the extra premium by not letting you play the game for the first 5 days. I already hate that this model is already becoming an industry standard, but what makes it even more egregious in this case is that Avowed has a premium Steelbook edition that costs $95 and still does not come with a physical copy. I'm not saying that Microsoft wants the Xbox studios to fail, but holy shit, they're really hellbent on making it harder for them to succeed. And I have a feeling, when Avowed does end up coming to the PlayStation eventually, it's going to get a physical release. Like every fiber of my being wants to recommend you to go and buy this game at full price because it's so good. But I can't really say that out loud because the business practices surrounding it are so horrible. And the only thing it does is make me feel bad for the team at Obsidian that has worked so hard on this game, because it's not their fault. The blame lies squarely and entirely on Microsoft and Xbox. And that brings me to my second point. Both of these posts are just plain fucking stupid and need to be ignored. What doesn't need to be ignored is the game itself. Every day it becomes more and more apparent that nobody really cares about the actual situation or the thing itself. The only thing that matters to people is whether something aligns with their own ingrained and preconceived notions. So people who want to hate this game will find plenty of things to hate about it, and goalposts will be moved over and over to make sure of it.
That's the way things are these days. Let's just put a zip here, a swastika there. Why not? Who the hell even cares?
But one thing remains true. Skyrim gets made fun of for a lot of reasons, but even after 13 years, we haven't seen anything like it in the market. Until now. Avowed may be a smaller game in size and scope, but it took me straight back to the time when I was 17 and on summer break, and I did nothing but play Skyrim for 18 hours a day. It has the kind of world and writing where you can easily lose yourself for over 60 hours. It also gives you the freedom to play in so many different ways, and you can finish it well under 30 hours should you choose. Either way, it's a game worth taking a look. Whether you do that through Game Pass or at full price or during a sale, that's up to you.